Finally, I get to talk about a dungeon crawler that doesn't have a forced always online connection. Of course, I'm saying that knowing full well that that was a choice that no one was forcing me to make. It was and will be, if I cover another game with that same problem, entirely my own fault. But the change is still nice. Grim Dawn, today's subject, is an interesting title in that I played it off and on since I bought it a little over 2 years ago, but I've never beaten it front to back. It's also now, as I'm writing this, that I realize that this is a common theme for dungeon crawlers that I have played. Last Epoch, Titan Quest, Chronicon, Slormancer, Victor Vran, Wolfson, Van Helsing, Hero Siege, Ash, and Rust, even both of Warhammer's takes on the genre. And those are just the games that have the standard, familiar, isometric trappings of Diablo. That doesn't account for those with twists on the genre, with things like base building, semi-realistic simulation of various gameplay elements, or first-person grid-based dungeon crawlers, or those that violently shove those loot and RPG mechanics into a first-person shooter. It leads me to wonder if this is one of those problems with having such a large back catalog of games to play, or if time is, as it always seems to be, the most defining limitation of playing anything at all. I'm inclined to believe that it has to be one of those two possibilities, since I count Grim Dawn as being among those on and off games, and Grim Dawn is a great time. It was developed and published by Crate Entertainment, whose entire library of games consists of Grim Dawn, its DLCs, and a city builder called Farthest Frontier, which entered early access in August of 2022. They haven't been around too long. Well, not as Crate Entertainment anyway. Iron Lore Entertainment was founded by Brian Sullivan and Paul Chiafo in 2000. It'd be another 6 years before the release of Titan Quest, a unique ARPG dungeon crawler that's based on various mythologies with some mechanical holdovers that can be seen in Grim Dawn. It would then go on to help work with Relic Entertainment on one of the most played games of my childhood, Warhammer 40,000 Dawn of War Soulstorm, a title where I probably spent more time in skirmish than on my actual homework. This wouldn't save them, however, and as of February 19, 2008, they would shut their doors due to funding issues. But not before publicly announcing the creation of Crate Entertainment, literally the day before. And how does such a new, intensely understaffed indie studio with proven skill but no funds make a game? Grim Dawn hits Kickstarter in 2012, raising nearly double its pledge goal, and released in 2016 to high praise. It's a success story if ever there was one. A success story that naturally warrants the question that I intend to answer: is Grim Dawn worth it? Tag not found, tag skill class name. Yeah, that sounds like something a mod might have been involved with. Have they mentioned this game has an extensive modding scene? And before you say it, don't worry, this run is unmodded. I can't even run these modded characters in the base game anyway. And since I want to start fresh for the sake of this review,
We paid a heavy price, but the trap worked.
You seem surprised.
It's been a while since we've had a win. How long will it hold?
I've never entrapped a being like this, but the bonds hold, for now.
How do we dispose of it?
I'm just a witch. You're the soldier.
If it bleeds, I can kill it.
How do you kill a spirit, though?
If you kill the mortal vessel while it's bound, the spirit may perish within. If it escapes...
It's listening to us.
What are you?
Others of your kind name us ethereal.
Why have you invaded our world?
Your world. We existed first, but were managed by your corrupt gods. Your part opened the way, and now we return to reclaim what by right should be ours.
I've heard enough of this rubbish. Let's hang it.
Destroy this vessel, and I will find another. I have tasted its desires and emotions. Your kind is weak. You have already lost this war.
Do it.
Captain!
Cut him down!
What? Are you mad? Better safe than sorry.
The spirit has fled!
This is a human now.
The captain is correct. When they awaken, they won't remember a thing.
The ethereal was right. The war is lost. We're a resistance now, and we need every human survivor we can call to our cause. Maybe this one here can still die with some honor. If they ever wake up, send them to me. If they don't, bury him deep with the others.
You know, I've had better starts to my day before, but I also don't think there's much I've dealt with that can really compare to that. So Jarvis here wants me to head over to Captain Bourbon. Sounds like a made-up name, but the hangman's name is Jarvis, so maybe all the names are made up in this shitty apocalyptic world. Oh, shit. It's John Bourbon. Nice. So everyone's calling me Taken on account of the whole failed possession thing, and Johnny B here needs some help dealing with these things reanimating the recently deceased. Me, well, I'm up for the task. There can only be one reanimating force around here, and obviously it's gonna be me. Soon. Unlike other ARPGs, you don't actually pick your class here called Masteries at the start of the game. No, you pick it the first time you level up. Honestly, kind of an arbitrary difference, but whatever. There's 9 masteries to choose from here, 3 of which are thanks to the Ashes of Malmouth and Forgotten Gods DLCs, but only a few really pique my interest. Occultist is interesting, showing off a potential summoning focus based on a Raven and a Hellhound. Shaman, likewise, seems like they might be able to pull out some more natural creatures for aid based on its description, but let's be honest, we all know what I'm aiming for here. Of course I'm gonna be a necromancer, are you kidding me? Let me face roll every enemy I come across with my boners. Yes, I know what I said. Each level grants a single attribute point and 3 skill points. At level 50 to 90, earn skill points lower to 2 and then lower again to 1 for levels 91 forward. The attributes you can spec into come in 3 different flavors: physique, cunning, and spirit, each of which influences a few different statistics tied to your character. Skill points can be invested into skills or directly into a mastery itself, the latter of which also directly upgrades various stats, including your attributes. You also need a base amount invested in order to gain certain skills. 1 skill point here immediately lets me put the remaining 2 into Raised Skeleton. See, this is where the game truly begins, and monsters start dropping some interesting loot. I mean, not actually that interesting, or even as interesting as later loot, because of course, but I'll cover that when I get to it. The reanimator I'm looking for is named Kryzog. I don't know why he needs 2 G's in his name. His name was already pretty unique, especially, you know, John and Jarvis. He's got some Aether corruption going on too, which, oh, no, wait, I haven't really talked about the story that much, have I? So this place is called Cairn, and it's a world with some problems. Well, I mean, one big problem. At this moment, there's these weird beings called ethereals ending the world and making everything pretty shit for everyone, and everyone is depressed because the world's ending and everything is pretty shit for everyone. Got it? Good. Welcome to a dungeon crawler. Your story exists for those interested in it, but it's never been the main focus. In this case, I do find the world pretty interesting, more so than the plot. More on that later. More important right now, Kryzog has that whole Aether corruption thing going on, which in terms of mechanics doesn't mean too much because my boners don't care. He drops this little orb thing I can attack, which spawns even more loot, which is something certain enemies can do. I love it. He also drops my second rare piece of gear, Kryzog's Skull of Scorching. Kinda useless for my build in terms of its benefits, but it's still statistically better than what I've got in my offhand right now, which is nothing because I'm carrying around a gun. Plus, you know, it's a skull. Along the lower path here are some Aether crystals that themselves drop Aether crystals and a ruined shrine. A shrine, should it be cleansed via either offering items or beating a combat encounter, grants a devotion point. Devotion is a skill tree in itself, largely unrelated towards your standard leveling. One of the best parts about Devotion, though, is that it can also unlock skills, but these skills need to be attached to a skill you already have unlocked. This can be amazing in the right hands, in the right builds, but at the moment I'm failing to figure out how the game terms minions as it relates to skills. By the way, it's pets. That's what they call them. They call them pets. Reanimator's dealt with now, leaving John to tell me about a scientist named Kasparov who'd like to talk to me. He isn't far, just in the building adjacent to the Rift Gate in town, which is fast travel for those curious. He also mentions a guy named Barnabas who might need a hand with something else. Kasparov doesn't really do too much, just lore dump and grant me an extra skill point for handing over an Aether crystal. No, his apprentice is the one to really watch out for once she's found later. Barnabas, on the other hand, is in need of help with the water pumps and something's wrong with the water. Scrap is needed, which I conveniently already have, which in turn immediately leads to some slith hunting on account of their tainting the water supply. I managed to nab my 8th level while doing so, and you've likely noticed my skeletons have already reached their max level 16. But don't worry, my boners can get stronger. Vyloth and his Slith siblings have been laid to rest, so telling Barnabas is probably a good idea, but not before nabbing 2 epics, one of which is from a nearby shrine. You know, I think I've skirted the topic long enough. You're probably wondering how Grimdawn's loot stacks up in comparison to other dungeon crawlers, and good news, it's good. I don't know what you were expecting when I said good news. Grimdawn's got a few things working on its loot front. You've got your standard dungeon crawler tiers, of course, common, magic, rare, legendary, but there's also broken, items that are pretty much useless, epic, the second highest rarity, that includes set items, double rare, which is like a standard rare but statistically better in terms of its stat rolls, and monster and frequence, which has a separate stat roll than a standard rare item. Something cool to note is that both epic and legendary items are unique in terms of both art and effects, though the effects naturally have variations in terms of the actual numbers involved. And legendaries can't even start dropping until you hit at least level 50. On top of that, you also have components and augments that can be applied to specific items that can potentially give bonuses to stats and skills, buffs, net use skills with a percent chance to activate when you're hit or when you hit, or just grant an actively usable skill as long as they're equipped. All of those effects are also capable of being on a base bit of gear even without that component or augment. These components can also be used in the game's crafting system, which, the crafting system's not that special. The only thing really notable here is that you can get blueprints for your craftables from a few sources, which does include loot drops. In terms of equipment slots, you've got your standard feet, leg, chest, head, shoulder, wrist, main hand, offhand, belt, neck, and 2 ring slots. There's also relic and metal slots. In this case, the shrine dropped a pistol, Mutiny. It's certainly better than what I've got, but I have neither the level nor the stats to use it, since it requires level 14 and a 98 physique. The epic ring Blood Seal dropped is also useful since I don't have any rings yet, but likewise can't be used at the moment since it has that same level requirement. The Impervious Vyloth's Ring of Alacrity is a ring of lower rarity, but it can also be used sooner with a level requirement of 9. Everything else here isn't as useful or interesting as these 3 items alone. This was a successful hunt with a reward that nets me level 9, a few steps closer to my next boner upgrade. Gotta head out to Burwitch now, which is a pretty straight shot from Devil's Crossing. There's some people I need to get and some things I need to kill, unrelated. Along the way is this cave, in which I rescue some less than lucky people from convicts, and just like that I'm at level 10, and Grim Dawn gives me one of the main reasons why I enjoy this game. So I love theory crafting, actually building my character's build in these games, tinkering around with my abilities, my skills, experimenting with what can and can't work alone or in tandem through trial and error. Any and all customization of my potential playstyle is the primary reason I come back to these kinds of games as often as I do. And the loot I can find interacting with my playstyle in both direct and indirect ways is something I likewise love. And knowing that I earn that build's lethality through a mixture of actually planning and playing as a character specifically is just, it feels so good. It's so rewarding. In Diablo 3, for example, your potential planning is limited primarily through your gear since levels unlock skills as opposed to skill point investment. It actively encourages playstyle experimentation as a result, but individuality and that feeling of payoff for your time spent feels gutted since your build becomes directly focused on loot more than anything else. Gear that can be freely swapped from whatever hub you happen to be in at the time. In that game, I have 1 character of every single class, but that is it. Only 1. Any extras I make are for seasons alone, and whether or not I remove them or replace the one that already exists for that class post-season, I have in the past literally decided through a coin flip. Grim Dawn isn't like that. I mentioned that there's 9 masteries to pick from, right? That's a half-truth. You see, level 10, you get to pick another one. This game allows you to combine 2 different masteries, which means that this game, like Titan Quest before it, has a dual class system with a total of 36 potential class combinations, not to mention potential characters that focus entirely on one class instead of going with 2, that's not a choice I would recommend to anyone. There's so many possibilities of playstyles and skill combinations, and I love it so goddamn much. This shit right here is one of the main reasons I enjoy this game as much as I do. Yeah, there's the loot, the cool music, the interesting tidbits of lore, but all of that would be nothing if it isn't fun to play, and this is the reason why I find it so fun to play. It's the sundae that everything else is the cherry on top for. It is such a fucking cool system. Look, by now I think I've already covered as much as I believe is necessary to talk about this game. The wondrous thing about that, of course, this was all within the first hour and a half of game time. But I've still got another 20-ish hours of footage before I just stopped recording and just played. So here's me jumping around a bit with largely unconnected points, the first of which of course being, got some cool ass music. Another cool thing about Grim Dawn, apart from some time in the endgame, the maps aren't procedurally generated. Once you've scoped out the map, you'll always know the layout forevermore. Occasionally, it'll still feel like it's got that kind of like, I've been here before vibe, in terms of like things like reused assets or stuff like that, but for the most part, it's really cool. Really leads to this feeling of this place being an actual place.
Bourbon.
Being the necromancer that I love to be in these games, should not surprise you for me to say that race skeleton is a cool skill. The problem with it is the inability to decide what kind of skeleton is summoned. There's 4 different kinds of skeletons that can be summoned based on a chance percentage related towards the skill level. But if you have a ranged boner and it's packed into a hallway as tightly as physically possible, it can try to fire at enemies through walls. Mostly it's noticeable around corners and the enemy goes into and out of view really quickly, but the boner won't pathfind on its own to a spot where it can actually hit its intended target. Kind of annoying, but Pet Attack also gathers all minions to wherever you happen to click, so at least there's a workaround. Even if it is a bit annoying to do so in the middle of a fight, since it pulls all of your pets as opposed to just a select few. On the topic of pets, some devotion skills can be attached to them, thus making them potentially proc with their attacks as opposed to your own skill usage, which is nice. There's someone who can cast illusions on your gear to make them look like other gear, cosmetic stuff. Nice, but the illusion chosen is item specific, so if you change gear, you'll have to get the illusion again. There is inventory space increases as some specific quest rewards, which is nice. Most of the time, an inventory increase in these kinds of games is restricted solely towards stash tabs, and while there is that here too, it's nice that I won't have to go back to town as often as I do in other dungeon crawlers to offload my drops. This game has a reputation system, which is not something you would expect from a dungeon crawler, wherein you have a reputation attached to various factions in the game, including enemy factions. There's all kinds of cool shit hidden inside of it. You can increase your reputation in a few ways, including, though not limited to, killing specific monsters at or around your level, as well as turning in quests or bounties once those are unlocked. Decreasing it is done in much the same way. Let's say you fight some jerk with Cronley's gang. You'll lose reputation with Cronley's gang, because why wouldn't you? You killed that man. You won't see his family ever again. His children will stay up tonight wondering where daddy went while his wife sobs on the porch knowing that Nicholas's days of providing for his family are over. Darius Cronley will personally hunt you down and tear off your head so he can The people of Devil's Crossing will probably take kindly to it though. Probably a fair trade. There are things called domains, which attach modifiers to the environment and enemies within. The enemies scale with your level, which means that they're pretty good for increasing nearby faction reputation alongside bounties, and come in different tiers with more modifiers and thus higher rewards. Apart from normal and veteran, which you have straight from the start, difficulties are unlocked by beating the game. I've never really liked this as a feature in any game, but in dungeon crawlers especially, I guess it's somewhat more understandable. Games like these expect you to have obtained some good gear by the time you unlock them, and the enemies found therein almost require them to progress past. Kinda like a new game plus that makes the game more difficult to account for your assumed mastery of the game's mechanics. There's some great DLC here. Ashes of Malmuth and Forgotten Gods open up more of Cairn, and the Crucible is a separate game mode based on surviving waves of enemies for special rewards. That pet problem is still relevant here though. Weird little glitch, and the only one I came across in my entire time playing this game. There's a quest called Hidden Wealth. I completed it, even have the achievement for it, and closed the game a bit later. The next time I launch it though, I still have the quest, as well as the ability to collect the loot from the chest the quest is about, because the prompt to use dynamite doesn't exist here either. Whatever. Free shit is free shit, I guess. Constitution, it's a cool-ass mechanic. It's something I consistently forget about, and it isn't because it's bad, it's just very passive. Constitution is, much like pretty much everything else, determined by your stats and gear. It acts like a secondary health bar, but functions primarily for regeneration. As long as you have some Constitution, you can rapidly regain health outside of combat, which if you're evasive enough in a fight is incredibly useful, but once that Constitution runs out, you can't regain health nearly as quickly. It itself doesn't regenerate, however, but it can be regained through various methods like eating random food you find on the ground or just leveling up. There's just so many secrets to be found. It includes secrets inside of secrets, dungeons inside of secrets, secrets inside of dungeons, and dungeons inside of dungeons, and it's all just great. The lore is interesting, honestly. It's odd to say about a dungeon crawler like this, honestly, because a lot of the time I end up not paying as much attention towards the story. Like, okay, this isn't a spoiler for the main plotline for the game. Arkovia is a former empire. It fell a long time ago, whose king, King Rowan, left the kingdom and abandoned his title and claims at the behest of Moog Drogan, the latter being a god in the realm of Cairn, who claimed that Rowan's empire was doomed for failure. The now former King Rowan managed to convince some others to join him in leaving Arkovia behind, a group that would eventually come to be known as the Rowari, or Rovers. Now, the people with power that he left behind, the oligarchs as they're known, were generally corrupt and preferred his leaving since they would gain more power themselves with his leaving. That's not the end of it, though, because the oligarchs had a problem with necromancy, initiating harsh crackdowns of the practice that led to their imprisonment of one individual called Uraburuk, whose control over the arts was so absolute that he seemed utterly incapable of dying at all. Which, unfortunately, did not dissuade the oligarchs from trying to extract as many answers from him as possible within the aptly named Steps of Torment, in order to somehow, through his interrogations, find a way to achieve immortality. They would soon enough break him and his will, and he would grant them their wish, or so they believed. Their newfound immortality was more a kiss. It was more a kiss. Their newfound immortality was more a curse than a gift, and the one who granted it to them was nowhere to be found after the fact, and due to their own decisions, there was likewise no one in Arkovia to potentially help them now. The deceased necromancers they had already killed before Uraburuk offering no counsel within the steps. They could, as they had hoped, live forever, undying, in spirit, but their bodies would pay the cost, a price that all of Arkovia would suffer. Their physical forms still experienced the decay that age and time brings on us all, never truly healing from anything, any wound inflicted, much less those that would otherwise have ended their lives. They still felt everything that comes with being alive and being dead, but now must spend eternity locked away inside their own rotting, unhealing bodies, entirely incapable of escape. They became doomed to roam these lands forever, losing bits and pieces of themselves with every passing moment until all that remains is a husk, a shell of some living thing that has lost everything it ever was or ever could have been. Some would incidentally or otherwise bring new life into the cell and abandon them to the surrounding nature, harpies to match and hunt alongside the new undead. The Empire of Arkovia would die, because no one inside of it could die, and the oligarchs who'd effectively condemned its people to this new cruel existence would find themselves beneath Cairn, left inside the ruined remains of their once prosperous city, left to rot within their own failure. Grim Dawn has quickly found itself among my favorite RPG games, and the fuck do I mean RPG games? RPG already means, it means roleplay. Grim Dawn has quickly found itself among my favorite RPGs, and I'm gonna continue doing that whole on-again, off-again thing I do with all the games I really enjoy, but not in the way where I feel obliged to restart from scratch out of necessity because I've forgotten where I was. It's got a killer loot system, satisfying gameplay tied directly into the way you build your character, an interesting world, good music to match the tone its world presents. It's a great time, well worth its $25 base price, especially for those who, like me, have played dungeon crawlers in this vein since the day they were born. There's your verdict. Oh, and before I forget, I'm not doing Reload next, not because I don't want to, but because I want to play it through before that. Don't tell me you're surprised. My profile picture on nearly everything at the moment has been a crop picture of a still from official gameplay footage pretty much since it dropped. I've been stoked for a while. I'm gonna take my time with it, which means I should see about something else I should review first. I'll see you later. Story out.